U.S. presidential candidates make their final push for primary votes as a record turnout is expected in New Hampshire. The Centers for Disease Control activates the Zika virus alert to the highest level. And an explosion of color and glitz at Carnival in Rio as samba schools vie for the title. Africa 54 starts right now. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin in the U.S., where the campaign rhetoric is at a fever pitch as voters cast their ballots in the nation's first presidential primary. Will the state of New Hampshire begin to separate the contenders from the pretenders in the race for the White House? Voters in 3 small towns cast their ballots in the first minutes of Tuesday, kicking off the presidential primary season. In one of the 3 towns, Dixville Notch, 9 votes were cast in the pre-dawn hours of Tuesday. Following the voting, election officials tallied the ballots.
We have for Donald J. Trump, 2. For John R. Kasich, we have 3.
3 Kasich.
And that was all the Republican votes. On the Democratic side, we have 4 votes cast for Bernie Sanders. None for Hillary.
Though Ohio Governor John Kasich did well in Dixville Notch, heading into Tuesday's voting, Donald Trump maintained a comfortable lead in the Republican race, with Kasich, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush in a tight race for second place. Ahead of Tuesday's voting, opinion polls showed Sanders with a double-digit lead over Clinton in New Hampshire. Some polls have shown Kasich surging in New Hampshire, where he says he has a great team.
We got the best army in New Hampshire. They're going to knock on everybody's doors, whether it rains, whether it snows, it doesn't matter. We're marching, and we're going to have a great Tuesday.
After Tuesday, the Republicans head to South Carolina for a primary February 20th. That same day, the Democratic Party candidates will take part in Nevada caucuses. The Republicans hold their caucuses in Nevada February 23rd. The South Carolina Democratic primary is February 27th. The other 2 New Hampshire towns that voted shortly after midnight are Millsfield and Hat's Location. Well, for more on today's primary and what's at stake for the candidates, VOA's national correspondent Jim Malone joins us live from Manchester, New Hampshire. Jim, for which candidate is the New Hampshire a make or break state?
I would say at this point, Vincent, that you're looking at the 3 Republican governors really need to perform well here in New Hampshire. It's a more moderate state. There's a lot of independent voters. So consider former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and John Kasich, the governor of Ohio. All of them looking to break out here, but there's lots of competition. Don't forget Ted Cruz, who won the Iowa caucuses, and Marco Rubio, who was surging here in New Hampshire behind Donald Trump, but then had a rough debate the other night. So the crowded Republican field is something we hope will get sorted out a bit tonight, but you know what? I wouldn't bet on it.
We did mention that a big turnout was expected. How do you describe it?
Yeah, the early indications are that the turnout is pretty strong here. The Secretary of State for New Hampshire is expecting well over 500,000 people to turn out in this state. It's a tradition for people to get out and vote in the primary. It's also a tradition for people to show up at the last minute and make a decision right in the voting booth. And they can register to vote in either primary at the last minute as well. That's why, even though we have a lot of polling in New Hampshire that shows Bernie Sanders ahead on the Democratic side and Donald Trump on the Republican, there's a lot of uncertainty here in New Hampshire about what the outcome will be. It makes for great political sport. And also, we should note, New Hampshire has a critical role in our election process. Usually the people who do well here go on to be very competitive for their party nominations.
Regardless of that, Jim, some of our viewers have asked me, could somebody lose so miserably but still move on and end up winning the elections?
Well, absolutely, and we've seen that before. I mean, John McCain won here in 2000, but George W. Bush won the Republican nomination and the presidency. So it's not always that New Hampshire winners go on to win either the nomination or the presidency, for that fact, but it usually is a key test, and what it may do is reset the race. You may see several contenders, if they don't do well here in New Hampshire, decide to drop out shortly thereafter before the race heads on to South Carolina to the south and, of course, to Nevada in the west. So we'll break away here from the Northeast, and there'll be more tests to come for all the candidates in both parties.
Now, very quickly, is it a little more easier or even more exciting for the Democratic Party now that they're just talking about two contenders?
Well, it's easier, but you know what? The strains are showing there's a lot of tension there. I think some Democrats are nervous about this. Hillary Clinton wants to get close to Bernie Sanders here. She feels she'll have a better shot in South Carolina. But the Democratic race has become tense, and former President Bill Clinton has become a part of that.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for your insights. We look forward to talking to you again. That's VOA's national correspondent reporting live from Manchester, New Hampshire. Well, tragedy struck in Germany on Tuesday. A head-on train crash in southern Germany has killed at least 9 people and wounded about 100 others, according to the nation's transport minister. Rail company Meridian says 2 of its trains were involved in a serious collision about 60 kilometers southeast of Munich. Police say more than 50 passengers were seriously injured and had to be airlifted from the scene. The cause of the crash is not clear this time. Authorities say all survivors of the morning crash in Bavaria have been rescued from the wreckage and taken to hospitals. Authorities are set to begin sifting through the crash site to determine what really went wrong. Now, turning to the war in Syria, residents fleeing death in Russia air raids or in fighting between Syrian government troops and rebels are massing at the border with Turkey. Meanwhile, a United Nations report says detainees held by the Syrian government are being killed on a massive scale, amounting to a state of policy of extermination of the civilian population. VOA's Zlatica Hoke reports.
Thousands of Syrians have camped in the freezing cold at the northern border crossing with Turkey after fleeing government attacks in the past few days. Damascus has threatened to intensify attacks if Turkey and Saudi Arabia send forces to help the opposition.
We ask our brother, President Erdogan, to open a humanitarian corridor. Look at the women and children here. They have fled because of the intensity of the Russian strikes.
A Syrian rights group says at least 10 civilians were killed in Russia's relentless bombing of Aleppo Monday. Some of the people wounded in the bombing are being treated in Turkish hospitals.
Around 30,000 Syrians have now amassed in an area near the Turkish border. Obviously, as always, we will provide for our Syrian brothers and accept them when necessary.
Unprecedented numbers of migrants from Syria and elsewhere have left Turkey for Europe, putting a strain on smaller countries they pass on their westward route. The rich Western European countries say they cannot cope with so many migrants either. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has made her second trip to Turkey since October to discuss the refugee crisis.
We are not only shocked but also horrified by the human suffering of several thousand people as a result of bombing, especially on the Russian side.
Syrians fleeing their homes suffer cold, hunger and death along the way. Those who stay could face a worse fate in state prisons.
Prisoners are routinely tortured and beaten, forced to live in unsanitary and overcrowded cells with little food and no medical care. Many perish in detention. The mass scale of deaths of detainees suggests that the government of Syria is responsible for acts that amount to extermination as a crime against humanity.
International investigators on Monday published a report that says several thousand detainees have been executed, beaten to death, or otherwise left to die in Syria during its 5-year civil war. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, Yemeni forces and al-Qaeda militants battled Tuesday in the southern port city of Aden, leaving several people dead. The fighting took place in the Mansoura district. Residents there say the Yemeni troops were backed by aircraft from a Saudi-led coalition that has been fighting on behalf of President Abdirab Mansour Hadi for nearly a year. A witness told the French news agency that one rocket killed 4 members of the same family. The government is trying to establish control over Aden after pushing out Houthi rebels late last year. The Houthis still control Yemen's capital, Sana'a, and other parts in the north. The conflict that at one point forced Hadi to flee to Saudi Arabia has allowed fighters from al-Qaeda and Islamic State to take control of parts of Aden and other areas in southern Yemen. Well, for the latest on the fighting in Yemen, Zaid Al-Alaya, a Sana'a-based journalist, joins me on the phone. Good evening, Zaid.
Good evening.
Now, first describe to us what has been the nature of the latest fight and its impact.
Look, most of the fights are taking place in Marib and in the area called Farbat Mehm, in the entrance of Sana'a. That's around 40 to 50 kilometers from the capital. Fights between some forces loyal to President Hadi and the coalition, and like huge number of airstrikes that have been targeting the area. People in Sana'a now, the talk of the day is people are talking, now the war in Sana'a will start. No, they are coming in. That people are scared, but not to that much. People still living, but deprived of basic services, no electricity, no fuel, food commodities, basic...
Zaid, there were efforts to try and have a truce between the fighting sides. Question is, has the effort kind of foundered, or is there any effort whatsoever to bring peace?
Look, after what happened, if there was some common things or common issues that the two conflicting sides can discuss with the longing, with the prolonging the war, the common things between the warring parties are starting to disappear, and there is no common ground for the two sides to agree. I think the hope of establishing truce is getting narrower and narrower.
And so what are the citizens saying? What do they think is their hope?
Now what is happening in Sana'a and in some other areas is the hate towards the U.S. is increasing. Now in Sana'a, they started a campaign titled, "The U.S. is killing our people." You can find billboards, you can find signs in big streets, like really big billboards, with the title, "The United States of America is killing."
Why are they blaming the U.S.? Why are they blaming the U.S.?
Because they think it's like the U.S. has the power to stop the war, but they don't want to, because the U.S. is mainly interested in selling their arms and selling their weapons, improving their businesses. Like Yemenis, according to the people that speak here, Yemenis are only numbers. The U.S. doesn't look at them as like a crisis, and they think that the U.S. is cooperating because the war was announced first time from the U.S. when the Minister of Defense of Saudi Arabia announced the war when he was in America.
Well, Zaid, thank you very much for your reporting. Zaid Al-Alaya is a Yemeni journalist based in Sana'a. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, as the Zika virus spreads, what can the U.S. do to help contain the outbreak? Stay with us. Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with the latest news on the Zika virus. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent. President Barack Obama has asked the U.S. Congress for nearly $2 billion in emergency funds to fight Zika in the United States and other countries. U.S. health officials say the funding is critical for research and development, including analyzing suspected links between Zika and microcephaly, a condition in newborns that results in deformed skulls and underdeveloped brains. Zika, contracted through bites of the Aedes mosquito, has been spreading rapidly in South and Central America and the Caribbean and has been linked to the severe birth defects in Brazil. Researchers have found some preliminary evidence it may be transmitted through sexual contact. Public health officials' concern is focused on pregnant women and women who may become pregnant. Now joining us in the studio is Josh Michaud, Associate Director of Global Health Policy with the Kaiser Family Foundation. Mr. Michaud, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Also joining us live via Skype from Kent, Ohio, is Dr. Tara Smith, Associate Professor of Epidemiology at Kent State University. Dr. Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you first, Josh, the president of the U.S. has asked for $1.8 billion in funding to fight Zika. What is the role that the U.S. will play in this outbreak, looking at the fact that there are 50 reported cases so far by the CDC in the United States, but more, of course, in other countries?
That's right. The request from the president for $1.8 billion is mainly focused on the domestic response. So much of that funding would go to states to bolster their mosquito control, their lab and surveillance work to detect Zika, plus public education campaigns. But part of that money will be dedicated towards an international response, doing many of the same things, bolstering lab and surveillance network, doing some of the research that you mentioned, as well as working on prevention tools. And this request comes on the heels, as you may remember, 2 years ago, of a similar request for $5.4 billion for a response to the Ebola virus. And there are some funds still unspent from that request. And as part of this request, the Zika request, they're asking for some flexibility to redirect some of those funds to the Zika crisis.
Now, Dr. Smith, when we look at what is happening now, some people truly feel like there is no need to panic. This is being exaggerated. What do you think? How do you respond?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think there's a need to panic, but I think there is a need definitely to pay attention to control measures and to implement education within the population. There's definitely something going on, and we're trying to figure out exactly what the scope of the outbreak of microcephaly and potentially other neurological issues are in these affected countries, and how Zika relates to those.
Now, Zika was discovered in 1947 in Uganda, but there were no known report cases of microcephaly linked to this virus. Dr. Smith, what can you tell us about this time around? What is different?
Right. Well, this outbreak is much larger than ones we've seen previously. And looking back even at the outbreak in French Polynesia in 2013, some preliminary suggestions of a retrospective analysis have suggested that there may have been a microcephaly spike associated with that, or at least an increase that just wasn't caught at the time because it wasn't being looked for. So we really don't know how common this potential outcome of Zika infection is.
Okay, and Josh, I will get your reaction to that. But first, I would like the both of you to listen to this soundbite that we have. VOA spoke to Mr. Julius Lutwana, a virologist at the Uganda Virus Research Institute in Entebbe, Uganda. And when asked if he thought that the virus traveled from Uganda, this is what he had to say.
No, I don't think that is true. It is not true that the virus has traveled from Uganda, because the virus is not only in Uganda. While it was first identified in Uganda, it is spread over a wide area in sub-Saharan Africa and also in Asia. So there is the probability that it may have come from Asia, or it may have come from any other country in Africa where there is Zika virus. In 2007, there was an outbreak in Polynesia, And then I think it is from that area that it has moved towards Brazil.
So, Josh, how do you react to that?
Well, I think the point is a good one, that even though the virus was detected in Uganda in the first place, that doesn't mean that it wasn't elsewhere in Africa and in other continents as well. What we do know now is that it seems to have migrated over time, not knowing exactly where the migration occurred at what time, but it has migrated across the Pacific and now into Latin America.
And Dr. Smith, what is your reaction?
Right, I would tend to agree. The outbreak that we're seeing currently is from an Asian strain of Zika virus, so that has probably been circulating in Asian countries for a while.
Now, quickly, there's another condition that was mentioned in this. It's a Guillain-Barré syndrome, and they're still investigating this. What can you tell us about it, Dr. Smith?
Yeah, so this is another neurological condition. It can cause paralysis, can be temporary, or in some cases can be permanent. In worst cases, it can cause death. So this is something that is seen not infrequently and associated with infections such as Campylobacter or influenza virus. So there is a potential that Zika could be causing that too. They're also looking at other neurologic issues, even in babies, besides microcephaly, that Zika may be associated with. So they're looking at a very broad range of potential neurological complications in addition to microcephaly.
Okay, and Josh, Brazil has seen many cases of microcephaly. Colombia has seen some cases as well, and other countries. So what's going on in Brazil that is different?
Well, actually, Colombia has not seen any Zika-related microcephaly cases.
Yes.
The thought is right now that it was a matter of timing. If this link is true between Zika infection during pregnancy and microcephaly, then Brazil, because the virus was introduced there earlier than in other locations like Colombia, that you see now the outcomes of those pregnancies of women who were infected while they were pregnant in Brazil. We do know that there are many women in Colombia currently pregnant and infected with Zika. Whether or not their babies or a proportion of those babies will be born with microcephaly is still unknown, and it might be a matter of timing.
Okay, perhaps a matter of timing. Quickly, Dr. Smith, one final word?
Just beware of mosquitoes.
Okay, and that's a good way to end this. Josh, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Tara Smith, thanks for joining us from Kent.
Thank you.
And that was Josh Misho. He's Associate Director of Global Health Policy with the Kaiser Family Foundation, and Dr. Tara Smith, Associate Professor of Epidemiology at Kent State University. That's our Africa 54 Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, Lenore, thank you very much. And be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Brazil's carnival celebrations roll on in Rio. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. German President Joachim Gauck visits Nigeria, pledging his country's support in the fight against terrorism. In South Africa, protesters march to the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg, where judges hear the case that President Jacob Zuma should repay millions of dollars in public funds used to renovate his rural home. European Parliament President Martin Schulz says a stable Libya is in the best interest of Africa and Europe in a speech to the Tunisian parliament. In Senegal, African forces begin a 3-week counter-terrorism training program led by U.S. Special Forces. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Well, thousands of dancers, musicians and performers participated on the second and final day of the Samba parade portion of Rio's renowned Carnival. The Samba schools are divided into first, second and third leagues depending on their performance. With 6 other competitions on Sunday night, a total of 12 schools are vying to be crowned the best Samba school in the city. The annual parade is fiercely contested. There is no prize except a trophy and the associated glory. The winner will be announced on Wednesday, with judges rating schools in 9 different categories. Next up, this is what the future of American football may look like. It's Microsoft's augmented reality HoloLens concept, which imagines placing 3D images right into your home. Fans wearing special headsets could potentially see replays beamed right onto their coffee table. Favorite players could even appear to break through living room walls. Viewers at home may also be able to get a live first-person view of what players are seeing on the field, thanks to tiny cameras that may eventually be embedded in players' helmets. While the still in development technology may not become a reality for many years, NFL officials say the possibilities are endless. Well, and finally, a bizarre casting decision continues to cause controversy. Joseph Fiennes has defended his decision to play Michael Jackson in an upcoming comedy, despite a furor over the casting of a white British actor in the role of a black American superstar. Fiennes plays Jackson in the upcoming Elizabeth, Michael and Malone, a 20-minute satire produced by British pay TV channel Sky Arts. The decision to give Fiennes the role has triggered suggestions that mainstream media have learned nothing from the uproar over the lack of black candidates for the major Oscar acting awards this year for the second straight year. And that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words, where we teach you about words you hear in the news. Here is a word used by politician Terry McAuliffe when he ran for governor of the U.S. state of Virginia.
We're also proud that our ticket is in the mainstream of Virginia. And in this mainstream ticket, we are laser focused on the issues that matter to most Virginians.
Mainstream means the thoughts, beliefs, or choices that are accepted by the largest number of people. It is a word you might hear in stories about American politics or culture.
Now, when you hear the word mainstream,
you will know what this news word means.
To learn more news words, visit our website, learningenglish.voanews.com.